Hello, Pod Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
A.T. Pod Smash,
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. We are your hosts.
Penguin and Termite. I am Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right, and tonight we are talking about a topic that has been interesting me for a while, but until a recent life change of mine, I haven't felt necessarily comfortable talking about, and we'll get into all that with it.
We're getting real with our audience tonight.
We are talking about neurodiversity, or neurotypes, and how those neurotypes interact with gaming. So, yeah, it should be a very meaty, maybe even heavy at points conversation. And hopefully we do it justice. I'm not going to lie, a little bit nervous about it, but because I've sort of just started dipping my toe into this water. But I think it's a really interesting thing, a really interesting conversation, and I really want to discuss how it interacts with gaming. And actually, this was your topic idea. Not going to take credit for an idea that was actually yours when we started talking about this stuff. Mm-hmm. So hopefully it'll be good. So we'll get into what all that means and how it is relevant in a little bit, but first we are Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. So what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking a surprise, actually. I came home from work and I found a receipt on the kitchen table and I looked at it and saw there was beer bought. So I was like, sweet, my wife is amazing. She's the most amazing person in the world. For another night, I will get into why, but I have been working like 9-10 hour days and I've been getting home super late and I've had no time to get anything done other than just work and take care of the kids and make this podcast and be here for you guys and gals. So when I came home, to my delight, and saw beer in the fridge, I was prepared to drink whiskey tonight. I was delighted to see that I had this beer waiting for me, something I'd never had before. From the Kona Brewing Co., that is the Hawaiian brewing company. I've actually been there, which is awesome, on the island of Oahu. I'm drinking the Island Colada Cream Ale, brewed with coconut and pineapple. Natural flavors added, which may or may not be good, but in this case, it is good. And it's actually part of a series of limited release beers called the Aloha series. And there's not a whole lot on the can about that other than find your Aloha with this tropical brew inspired by the Pina Colada with real coconut and pineapple. So it is a very creamy beer, as it's called a cream ale. It does kind of have that like milk stout body to it. Obviously, it's not a stout. It's just a regular ale. I don't have a glass, so I can't see what color it is. But looking in the can, it looks like it's an amber-ish color. And it's not too sweet, which is awesome. When you see coconut and pineapple and pina colada inspired, you're like, oh, this is going to be a sugar bomb. But it's not. It actually has beer flavor to it. Kona doesn't make junk. They're good stuff. I love their beers, and I frequent them throughout the summer. So go check it out. It is at Wegmans, I believe. So Kona Brewing's Island Colada Cream Ale.
Nice. I am working my way through my last run to Total Wine, and I got this beer from Old Busthead in Fauquier, Virginia.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Fauquier. And Fauquier. And I don't know how the locals pronounce it. I'd be really interested to know because it's a French word, so it should be like Fauquier or something like that.
Right.
But of course, Virginians are going to be like, Fauquier.
We are a family-friendly podcast.
I just said a name of a Virginia town, that's all. So yeah, Old Busthead, it's called Vint Hill. It's from the Vint Hill series, and it's called Vixen Irish Red Ale. And I've been on a bit of a red ale kick, as you guys may know, and I'm really enjoying trying out kind of the different varieties in red ales, because I thought red ales all kind of tasted the same for a while, but between this and the other one I had, I'm actually kind of becoming a fan. Anyways, it does have something to read. It says, our deep amber Irish style red ale has a luster as rich as the thick-coated red fox that roams the local wood. Medium bodied with a clean finish, this Vixen draws you in with its sweet caramel and roasted malts. The tea-like soft bitterness on the back end is so pleasing, you'll be reaching for another glass of this wily brew. It's good. I did not think of red ales as sweet, but the last two red ales I've had on the podcast have been very sweet. And this one's definitely, I can definitely get the caramel, and I can definitely, it's got the, how do I describe it? It's got the, thickness of tea, but by thickness, I don't mean, it's thick. I mean, it is kind of it's like drinking tea. It's definitely got that kind of quality to it. Almost cider. I've described it before as like a cider-like quality, and this one definitely. I mean, it's almost like I'm drinking a cider, and I like it. It's very good. So, Old Busthead's Vixen Irish Red. It's got a little fox on the front. Little artwork. It looks really cool. I like it.
That sounds fun. I like it too. I want to try it.
All right. Well, that is what we are drinking tonight. So, what is there anything you wanted to talk about in our little spot here?
Well, I have a favorite things. I'll save that. But yeah, I'm falling apart. Like there's a ridiculously high stressful situations going on at work with a very tight deadline and a massive project as in the midst of turnover. And there is a person leaving that may or may not be the best fit for our team who has made decisions that are not the way I would run things and not the way the team kind of likes how things have been run. And so this person's on their way out, and I've kind of filling that role with support from the company. And it has been an astronomically difficult task. I've worked now 3 Saturdays in a row, and actually one was a Sunday, and long hours, and I'm a salaried employee, so there's no extra compensation for this. It's just trying to get the product done so we can deliver it on time and have a quality product. So that's all happening, and I'm also training for a 10K in a way to kind of boost my weekly mileage with running. If you care at all about endurance sports, how many miles a week you run is kind of translates into general fitness and how much better you can be an endurance runner. And so I fell out of a pattern of running regularly with the stress of this job. And so I made a commitment in mid-March to get back to it and make running a thing. And I am such a better human being if I can run regularly. I am way less stressed and more here and present with my children and my family. And I'm just an all-around better person.
See, that's the difference between the two of us. Is I have no interest in being a better human being. In fact, I like to generally be a worse human being. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yep, we're like two sides of the same coin.
We are definitely complementary. Let's put it that way. And so yeah, I'm like we made a commitment to eat better and do more meal planning, and so we got so much better at this. And I've dropped some weight. I've increased my weekly mileage. Running has been going great, but then a sneaking kind of painful left hamstring has turned into more of a very painful situation where one of my runs I was just limping for 3 miles, and that has been over a week now of me trying to fix that, and it's not working. And so I went for a run today, and the entire left leg of my body from my hip to my Achilles tendon is not okay. I'm not limping, but it's not okay. So I am now trying to fight an injury, I guess, an onset of running alongside of a very stressful work situation. And all of that is pulling me away from what I love doing, which is video games. So as far as my free time, I'm still committing all of my family needs and all of my father needs. Like those things are met. Those things are fine. In fact, running has helped those greatly. I've been interacting with my kids a lot better lately and being able to support my wife through grad school, which is also the other side of my life that's going on. So that stuff has been made less stressful because of running, but now I'm dealing with high work stress and I might not be able to run and have to figure this out. So I'm just a mess. I am a wreck. And here I am trying to record a podcast about video games.
It'll be fine. You're doing fine. You're doing great. Keep it up.
Hey, thanks.
But also, you're the worst. Eat more Taco Bell.
I haven't had Taco Bell in so long, and oh my gosh! And like, I've been taking a break from beer lately, except for this one, of course, I'm drinking tonight. But I've been drinking a lot more whiskey and stuff, trying to cut back and do better. It's working.
I got my wife into some Taco Bell in a way that I haven't been able to. Like, so my wife for the longest time really wasn't into Taco Bell, and if she was, it was like I want nachos and I want a crunch wrap, and that's all she would ever eat there, and she would never try any of the fun new stuff. I got her to try a cheesy gordita crunch and she loved it, and I'm like, see there's more than just crunch wraps at this place. So yeah, it's fun. I did want to talk about, just really briefly, I wanted to talk about the some funny things that were happening with E3 in relation to the Elden Ring hype that continues.
Oh yeah, what's going on with that? You keep sending me links.
It's so funny. It's so amusing, but they keep burning themselves out in excitement for various things. It's so much so that it's become a meme. Or there's become the meme of the idea that like someone says that something's going to happen and everybody gets so excited about it only to be disappointed. Like that's become a meme in and of itself. But apparently there was like an unofficial source that linked Bandai Namco as being a partner with E3. this year.
Mm-hmm.
So that turned out to just be a copy, like a Photoshop, like using the list from last year's E3. That didn't actually happen, but Bandai Namco was part of was supposed to be part of last year's E3, and then but then the thing got canceled. Anyways, they took that and they photoshopped it with 2021 basically, and got people excited, like, oh, Bandai Namco is gonna have a thing at E3. Now, Bandai Namco may end up doing an event at E3, but it doesn't matter at this point. This particular round of announcements was a fake, so of course everyone just got so deflated. It's never going to happen. They're never going to announce it. It's so funny to watch the peaks and troughs of excitement. Just make it so funny. The latest one that people are, quote, hanging on to is that supposedly some GameStop promotional material for Elden Ring leaked, but it's like, again, it could just be completely real, right? Made up. Right, exactly. Like after the Grinch leak for Smash, like none of this can be trusted anymore. But the Elden Ring community is just desperate for anything, any possible thing, and it's fun to watch them burn themselves out. It's great. It's very entertaining.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So what's funny is that, again, it's been what, 2 years since the original teaser trailer. Like, for all intents and purposes, the game was being developed alongside Sekiro, apparently. So it's been in development for long enough. It's been long enough since the teaser trailer. Like, if there's one event that it's likely to be announced at, it'll be E3. You know what I mean? Like, it's very likely to get an announcement. A lot of people are pointing to Microsoft's showcase as a possibility for the announcement. So, like, there's a good chance, but it's still funny to watch them just cling on to whatever breadcrumbs they can, only to have their hopes dashed constantly.
It's so interesting that this type of game has gotten such a following. I guess it's a cult following or a niche, because it's not super mainstream, but it kind of is. To see these Demon Soul kind of Bloodborne games get so mainstream and so popular, and From Software becomes like the meteoric success that they are, and the reputation they have it's cool to like see how what was once this like very hardcore kind of group of people grow into more of an inclusive community. So it's fun. It's really cool to watch.
I think it's because it's kind of taken a life of its own. Because there have been so many like is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? There's so much hype surrounding it. Like, I think it's become one of those things that it's just like it's grown into a life of its own. It's almost like the game's going to be almost disappointing when the game does get announced, even if the game is great and amazing and wins awards, only because this whole whatever it is it is community that is just sustaining itself on just sheer madness alone is going to completely change. So it's whatever. It's great, but I find it an amusing, weird corner of the gaming community right now.
Yeah,
and it's something where I'm like, I'll have my weekly check-in with the Elden Ring subreddit to see what kind of madness is going on there this time.
Nice.
That's great. So cool. All right. We can, I guess, waiting for Elden Ring may or may not be your favorite thing, but
doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Favorite things.
Favorite Things is a segment of our show where we, Daniel and Daniel, Penguin and Termite, share with you the things that we are most excited about that we discovered or rediscovered or whatever, in hopes that you might find your next favorite thing.
So, a few weeks ago, my favorite thing this week, something that I'm digging and I'm very excited about. A few weeks ago, I may have mentioned that a coworker of mine gave me a launch model PlayStation 3. Yes. And if you look at the model number, it's the CECH 0A1, I believe. It's the A01, sorry. That's the last 3 digits. And that's the PS2 hardware is on the board. And it did not turn on. It just like beeps red. And I had it turned into our friend of the show, who knows who we are and who has worked on consoles for me in the past, who fixed my Virtual Boy. It's Fredericksburg Console Mod, so go look him up on Facebook. I took it to him immediately, and he assessed the system and recommended some fixes, and one of which was the capacitors that go bad over time because of their poor quality. And so he had, as of last night, I was notified with lots of videos and pictures, which made me extremely excited that the system has been resurrected. The capacitors have been replaced, and I am to get this system this week as he's putting it all back together now, followed by a picture of some PlayStation 3 controllers that are all genuine, which are extremely hard to find in a sea of fakes and knockoffs that he offered to sell me. So I'm going to pick up a couple of new colored controllers alongside of paying him to fix this console, and I will have an original launch launch PlayStation 3 that is fully backwards compatible with PS1, PS2, and of course it plays PS3 games. I'm extremely excited. I cannot wait. I was up till like way too late chatting later than I should have been back and forth with him over the excitement that we both shared for this console. He had screenshots of BioShock 2 running on it. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to get it back.
There must be something really cathartic and satisfying, like viscerally satisfying about like firing it up for the first time after you fixed it. You know what I mean? Like,
especially the job that he did. He took it all the way down to the motherboard, and he took all of the heat sinks and stuff off and reapplied thermal paste, soldered on new desoldered the existing capacitors and put new ones in. Like, that's a lot of intricate electronics work. And like to do all that work and put all that time in and then fire it up and it works. Like, that's got to be amazing.
Yeah, it's got to feel great.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited to see it.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love the look of the launch. It might be like my favorite looking console of all of them is the launch PlayStation 3. It's the big, fat, chromed out, shiny black, piano black. Like, oh, I love it. I can't wait to have it. I cannot wait. I'm so excited.
So I am right now hitting enter on my computer, which is going to send you a link to my favorite thing right now.
Oh,
now,
I don't see it. Unless it's on Facebook.
It's on Facebook, yeah, sorry. My favorite thing is a video, and I feel like I haven't properly shared a video, maybe occasionally here and there, but we grew up in the halcyon days of YouTube and Google Video. I don't remember if you remember Google Video back in the day, but back when Google was trying to compete. Yes.
Wow. That has to be fake. There's no way that much liquid comes out.
No, so hold on. So what I sent him, and that caused him into such laughing fits, is a video of someone taking a Coke and Mentos. Now you may be like, we've seen a million videos of Coke and Mentos. This can't be that impressive, right? Well, they take it and they put it into someone's toilet, and it's like spins around the room for a little bit until it lands in the toilet, and then what you see is just like a cascade of water flooding out of this toilet towards the camera, and then it cuts off, and it's so funny. And I don't know if it's real or if it's fake. I'm inclined to think it might be fake because the gushing of water reminds me very much of that scene from The Shining with the blood coming out of the elevator or whatever, so I'm inclined to think that it's probably faked. But it works so well. It was so seamlessly done that it's just like you don't expect it, and then it goes crazy. And if it wasn't faked, then it is one of the coolest things I've ever seen and the most hilarious things. I watched that video and I was cracking up. But again, it just reminded me of like I said, the halcyon days of YouTube back when we would just like I saw this funny video, and you'd share like 15 videos in a day because you kept finding hilarious and funny videos, and that's all we did with our time. I felt like back in like high school. As a teenager, and I loved it, and I missed that kind of aspect of it because sure, we're sharing funny memes and stuff these days, but there's something new and fresh about YouTube back when it first came out that, like, again, we got so many legendary videos from it, and this one just kind of reminded me of that. And I was cracking up today. It was funny because when I first started watching it, though, my son was looking over my shoulder and he watching the video. He kind of like got upset the first time, and then I rewatched it because I thought it was hilarious. I wanted to watch it again, and when he saw it a second time, he burst into tears. So he's like crying like on my shoulder, just like, torrents of tears. And I'm trying so hard to comfort him while not like completely cracking up at this video. It was a delightful time.
It's pretty ridiculous. So I think like the first 2/3 of the video are real, like seeing the Coke bottle fly everywhere. But then when the massive like deluge of brown liquid erupts all the way up to the ceiling and floods out of the bathroom, I think that's a little much. And how do you make that much fluid come out of a toilet? I think it's impossible. Like the toilet can't even contain that.
I'm watching it again. It's so funny. Well, but it's connected to a thing, like, right? It's connected to.
But even like the limitations of the hose that it's connected to, if you were to just wide open spray that, it would not create that much fluid. Like there's no way you can get that much pressure to push that much fluid through a toilet. That has to be faked.
So funny.
I'm convinced.
I can't stop watching it though. It's so funny. It doesn't matter if it's fake or not.
Right. It's still
really
hilarious.
Funny video. Yeah. You all should watch it. Oh man. Okay. That is my favorite thing. So
A
Go watch the
YouTube video
Do
and a
your
PlayStation
favorite.
3.
We'll see if we can link. I'll see if we can remember to link it in the description or whatever, and you guys can go find it. It's really, really funny though. So that is my favorite. If not, you can probably Google just flushing Coke and Mentos into toilet is the name of the video. So. All right, cool. Well, that leads us to our next segment, which is
DLC.
DLC. It stands for downloadable content, and it is a conversation you wouldn't normally have about video games. I don't really have anything on the docket for today, and since we kind of have a fairly serious and mildly controversial topic tonight, I don't think it would be appropriate to try to pick one that's super topical. So let's just do a blank blank.
A blank blank.
Yeah, so blank blank is where one of us picks a competition of some kind, the other one picks a couple video game characters, and we discuss who would win in that competition. So it doesn't have to be a fight. That's kind of what it was inspired by, is who would win in a fight, but it doesn't have to be that. Could be any. It shouldn't be that, actually. It could be any competition. And so I want you to pick the competition, and I will pick the characters. And the whole gimmick here is that we don't know what each other is picking. And yeah, so give yourself a moment to think if you need to, and I will pick some characters.
I think I know my competition. I just hope that you know what it is.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
So the competition that I am picking is a Barstool Racer race.
A Barstool Racer race.
Do you know what Barstool Racing is?
I don't.
Okay, so they take bar stools and they hook them up to what looks like a go-kart chassis with bicycle handlebars. Like, you can Google this, Barstool Racing, and there's lots of pictures. It is hilarious because you're super top-heavy, and they look like ridiculous go-karts.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look it up. But
it does require a little bit more finesse, because
Sure.
go-karts, you can hit turns really fast. If you turn too fast on a Barstool Racer, you're done. You're going to rock. You're going to fall right over. So what video game characters do you think?
Yeah, this may be an obvious one, but we can take a moment to discuss it, though. So the two characters I picked were Deckard Cain from Diablo 3.
Okay.
Stay a while and listen. Yeah,
right,
Deckard Cain.
Yep.
And Prince from Prince of Persia.
Okay.
The Prince, I should say, from Prince of Persia. I don't know if his name is Prince or not, but that's it. Those are the two. So again, you may think the obvious choice is the Prince from Prince of Persia, right? Because he's a crazy, Assassin's Creed, I run on walls and stuff like that.
Right.
But Deckard Cain is an old man who is used to balancing on three appendages, a three-legged bar stool, right? He has a cane, so he's an old man that is used to balancing on things like that. So, and he's got deep knowledge of the arcane and demonic underworld. So I think he'd probably know a thing or two about how to beat some young upstart in a race. That's what I think.
So it could go either way, because I sent you a link. You can watch this video while I talk to really get a picture of what Barstool Racing is. It's awesome. It's so funny. All right. So Deckard Cain would be old and not very agile. He doesn't move a lot, which would actually go into his, that's a good thing. And he's lightweight, which is also a good thing. And I feel like he would be able to control the Barstool Racer better than the young whippersnapper Prince of Persia hero who would want to win and be driven and competitive and
kind of a tortoise in the hare situation, right?
Yes. And so he would show up and be oh, I got this, no problem, with some confidence, knowing he can lean on his physical agility, and then he overdoes it just a little bit. And all it takes is just a little bit, and you're all on the sand. You're on the ground.
He'd be a bit of a showboater, too, you know what I mean? He'd be kind of a bit of a show-off. Look, I'm going to impress some young princess or whatever. The best part is both of these characters would be completely unfamiliar with this technology, though they may be familiar with bar stools themselves.
Right.
And so then it begs the question, who has probably spent more time on a bar stool? Probably Deckard Cain. So yeah,
absolutely,
okay, yeah, I think it's a good, again, you may immediately think Prince of Persia, but I think Deckard Cain would give him a run for his money at the very least. So,
I think so too.
So you should stay a while and continue to listen to this podcast. But we want to hear your thoughts. Who do you think would win in a Barstool race? And again, if you have not seen a Barstool race, you should. And if you're at a computer safely, not driving or anything, then you should look up Barstool racing because it's pretty amusing.
It's pretty funny.
And yes, we want to hear, once you are familiar with it, we want to hear what you think. If you think it's just completely ridiculous that an old man like Deckard Cain would beat a nice, healthy, young acrobat like Prince of Persia, then we want to hear that thought. If you think that Deckard Cain's got a good shot at it based on the thoughts that we put forward for you today, then we want to hear that as well. So you can be told and stay a while and listen to what Termite has to say about where you can find more of those thoughts.
You can find us at 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bitpodsmash.com. It's our landing website with links to all of our podcast platforms, as well as our RSS feed. You can throw it into any third-party app. If we are not somewhere you want us to be for your listening pleasure, let us know, and we'll put us there for your convenience, just for you. So you have to reach out to us. And how can you do that? Well, we also have links to all of our social media outlets as well. Also at 80bitpodsmash.com. Links to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have a Discord server. There's links to all of the servers. There's a link to our Discord server in all of our episodes. We are currently recording 190, or episode 190. That is 190 episodes for your convenience. Go check them all out. They're non-linear. You can jump around various topics that you care about. They're all there. Have a blast. Let us know what you think. Also, if you head on over to twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash, you can find us live streaming on both Monday and Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern. Monday night, we do a news show where we run through the weekly video game news. And Wednesday night, we do a more casual video game live stream where we like to talk about the developers and the pedigrees, but sometimes we just team up with friends and have fun. So go check us out on twitch.tv. Give us a subscribe. There's also a YouTube channel where all of our video content goes after we record it. So you can go check that link out at 80bitpodsmash.com. It's there for you. Subscribe to us there so you can be made aware and up to date on our comings and goings and what we're doing. And it would be great to have a review. If you could write a review of our show and of our content on any of your podcast platforms of your choice. If we find one, we will read it on the show. Unfortunately, not a lot of people are reviewing us, but it does help for us to get more exposure so we can grow our community and have more amazing people to hang out with in all of our content.
Nice.
So go check us out.
I want a really quick shout out to our friend Gamer Time, who frequently frequents our streams. But I want to specifically shout out a conversation I had with him that I think highlights some of the amusing differences in the way we do our streams. And he said that last time that he watched one of your streams, you guys had like a nice deep conversation about like different generational attitudes towards gaming. And I said, and he's like said that on my stream. He was like, yeah, I had a great conversation with Termite last time. And I said, you're going to get great conversations like that with Termite. With me, you're just going to get sass.
Well, there you have it. That's Penguin and Termite.
That's it, Penguin and Termite. You get
two sides of the same coin.
Interesting, deep conversation, or you can come get lambasted by Penguin. Either way.
Nice.
Good fun.
It was fun.
I definitely had fun with Gamer Time joining that live stream.
Awesome.
So keep be like Gamer Time and come hang out and chat with us. It always makes it more interesting when we have someone to interact with.
The more people, the better.
Exactly. Yep. But too many people, then we have to like moderate the streams because you get trolls and stuff. But it's fine. We would rather have that problem than the other problem,
right?
Of not enough. So
exactly.
Word. All right. So that's DLC. That's all of our segments, and so that leads us into our main topic of neurodiversity / neurotypes and video games. I actually have to get back to my notes though because I switched over to I have a little separate note where I keep track of any ideas that I have of video game characters that we haven't used in DLC before because we have a problem with repeating ourselves.
Solid Snake much?
That's where I pulled those two from, is I had those on my list. So
nice.
Cool, awesome. So, neurotype, gaming and neurodiversity. So what's a neurotype? What is neurodiversity? Let's start there, and then I have a couple of disclaimers that I want to go through before we get into this. So, yeah, what's a neurotype? / what is neurodiversity? What is this neurodiversity movement? What does it mean?
I am going to read from a wikiversity.org article about the neurodiversity movement, and this is from section 1, the basics, which is where we need to start because I'm very new to this entire topic, but it is very interesting. And the neurodiversity movement is centered around the idea that there are many natural forms of variant human wiring in the brain. This diversity of neurology is where the term neurodiversity originates from. A neurotype is the name given to one individual form of wiring. The so-called normal neurotype is referred to as neurotypical, abbreviated NT, and is what we once thought of as being the most common or, quote, typical form of wiring, hence the name. It is frequently considered by society at large, and particularly by medical professionals, to be the most desirable and possibly the only healthy type of brain functioning. The neurodiversity movement seeks to change that assumption. Advocates propose that there are many different neurotypes, perhaps so many that the so-called neurotypical are actually in the minority. Furthermore, they believe that each neurotype is its own kind of healthy brain with both pros and cons of ability, function, etc. Society is designed for neurotypical, and therefore the good side of many neurotypes is not seen because those who are not neurotypical are not able to succeed as easily in society. The movement seeks to make society change, to teach people about how to understand and support those who are neurodivergent, and create a society which does not discriminate against them.
Yes. Okay.
There you go.
Great introductory paragraph, and
Yes.
and that's also where I was pulling. I'm glad that I linked that to you because I pulled a lot of the knowledge I had from this as well, for research I did for this as well. So to dig into it further, you may be thinking about that, like, okay, how does this differ from personality? So personality is usually studied as something that's kind of from a neutral standpoint of like, oh yeah, it's just different. You got different personality, you know, like I'm a little extroverted, you're a little introverted. The way we view that and frame that is one of like something neutral. What the neurodiversity movement is trying to do is it's trying to do that for mental illness, which is typically seen by society as something that's negative. So these different neurotypes that we're going to be talking about, this is actually another way of saying that we're talking about mental illness tonight. Because again, but we want to approach it from this perspective because we don't want to discuss these things as if they are illnesses or broken things, that these are that people have something wrong with their brain, because that's what this movement is trying to destigmatize. It's trying to remove that pathology from this discussion and try to seek more of a neurological reconciliation for these people. And it began with the autistic spectrum disorder. And they really, this community of autistic individuals or family members of autistic individuals have sort of driven this idea that they're not broken. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just different. Their brains work differently. And it's our responsibility as, quote, neurotypical people to embrace those differences. It's our responsibility as a neurotypical society to embrace those differences and celebrate them and try not to stigmatize people who have these various differences in the way their brains work. But it's expanded beyond autism. And so I'll just go through kind of a list of some of the types of disorders, or what were previously labeled as disorders, that the neurodivergent movement is trying to give some more, grace towards and reframe them as different neurotypes instead. So on the list are things like anxiety disorders, autism spectrum disorder, as we discussed, ADHD. It is one diagnosis now. It's no longer considered ADD. And obviously this one's near and dear to my heart, so we'll get into that. Bipolar, depression, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, dissociative identity disorder, also known as multiple personality disorder, schizophrenia, narcolepsy, Down syndrome, synesthesia, obsessive compulsive disorder, and Tourette's are kind of are just a handful of these different neurotypes. And again, a lot of these you might be like, wow, that's just mental illness. It's like that the whole point of this discussion is to say, no, they're not ill, they're not sick, they don't need to be fixed. What they need better resources to help them fit into a world that is designed to be antithetical to what their brain type is. And the thought exercise I like to use is, imagine a world where the, quote, neurotypical, where the, quote, the majority of people were obsessive compulsive. Like the, quote, the person that is, quote, in our world neurotypical would then be the outcast. They would be probably seen as unclean because they don't compulsively clean things. They would be seen as something. Right. They would be seen as weird for not having this kind of deep understanding of ritualistic behavior. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't fit in, and you may even be at a disadvantage in a world that is structured for people who have obsessive compulsive tendencies. Mm-hmm. And so, if you think about it in that thought experiment, then it really is. It's like the world is designed by a very specific neurological type. And then we're told that that's the only type that's healthy and that everyone else is sick and needs to be fixed. And that's what this movement is seeking to destigmatize. It is not a movement without controversy. So here's where I'm going to get into my disclaimers. There are some criticisms, and some fairly valid criticisms of the neurodivergent movement. So I think a balance needs to be struck, because the reality is that it's like, okay, well, there's that great, it's one of those things where it's like the ideal bucks up against reality. The reality is there are people who suffer in this world because their brains work differently in a world that is designed in many ways to be hostile towards them. So those people, I think it's still fair to seek, for people who have these neurotypes, they should not be stigmatized in the other direction for seeking medical help with these conditions, like with these various
Right.
discrepancies, because we still, again, we may want the world to be one way, but the world is one way. So we still need to kind of live in it. We still need to kind of find a way to make it work. And so people should not be stigmatized. An autistic person who may be seeking medical assistance to help them get clarity in how to interact with people. Autism is a bad example. ADHD is probably a better example. People with ADHD shouldn't be told no, your brain's just different. You don't need medicine to help bridge the gap. It's like, no, in some cases you need medicine to bridge the gap because you still need to pay bills. You still need to get along with your boss. You still need to be able to accomplish things. So you shouldn't be, so there can be kind of a reverse stigmatization that can happen by people who kind of really buy into this movement to embrace what makes you different. And it's like, that's great, and that's all well and good, but sometimes sometimes you still need to pay the bills, right? So it can get kind of tricky and dicey, and so we're really, really just wanting to kind of be open-minded here, but we also don't want to just jump into this discussion and be like, all these people are sick and need to seek help. It's like, no, that's not the case either. There's definitely different ways that people should approach this, and there's definitely more that we can all learn in trying to figure out how to get along with one another better with our various neurological types. And then my other tiny little disclaimer is that pretty much all of these, again, quote, disorders, all of these neurotypes, they all exist on a spectrum. So, everybody's a little bit of all of these. You know what I mean? Like, everybody experiences anxiety and depression sometimes. Everybody swings wildly in almost a bipolar fashion sometimes between their moods. Everybody has trouble with attention. So, again, as we dig into some more of these neurotypes, you may be thinking to yourself, am I this? It's like, you may be a little bit of it, but it's just the fact is, people who get diagnosed for these things usually demonstrate these behaviors in a more extreme manner. But also many of them have learned to compensate and are high functioning. So again, the whole point of this movement is to say there's all types. It's all we're all folk, we're all just folk. So let's figure it out together. So
yeah, I love any message about affirmation and inclusivity upon anything in our society. Mm-hmm. And it might sound like wokeness, it might sound like radical leftness or whatever, but if you don't identify as a specific gender, or if you are in a minority of your race or your origin status, and people are treating you with hostility and ignorance, then that's a problem. And I think this goes for in this regard as well. And I'm learning a whole lot about what neurodiversity is, and also trying to have an inclusive look at that, especially when interacting with folks. As I mentioned earlier, at work, we're having a very stressful situation. So maybe there's a lot of these things at play here that are causing tension and causing some conflict at work that are making things more stressful for everyone. And it is imperative that everyone has the responsibility to kind of look out across the spectrum and see what's out there and learn from other people's perspectives and listen and acknowledge and be able to affirm and include anyone who might be different than you, and look at their motivations and look at what makes them tick and look at what drives them. And in this regard, of course, we're having a more serious conversation, but it affects the video game industry as well. And so people have different gaming habits, and people are either misrepresented or represented well in video games. And we're going to get into some of those details as well. And to have, for a gamer to sit down and see someone on their screen that looks and feels like they do, or reacts to stuff the way they do in a world that they might not ever get, that is amazing and paramount to their own realization of who they are and wellness and inclusive. It's awesome. So I'm all here for all of that. Mm-hmm. And I won't focus too much on the negative con aspect of that, but I do understand things like if you need medication to get by in your job, that's a conversation, and it's complex. There's gray area, there's nuance in those discussions, and so I don't want to sit in a spot where we're one way or the other and not listening to each other, because the whole point is inclusivity and the gray area and the nuance and listening to folks and listening to everyone. And
the point of this, the entire point of this, part of the point of this movement is to demonstrate how every neurotype has disadvantages and every neurotype has advantages, and that includes neurotypical, the quote neurotypical neurotype. It has advantages, sure, and again, a lot of those advantages are made evident because and strengthened because of the fact that the world is designed by neurotypicals. But it has disadvantages too. There are things that a neurotypical brain cannot do as well as an autistic brain or as well as a depressed brain, or any of these things. And then my final thought along those lines, and we can jump into talking about video games, I promise, is there's the scientific paradigm and there's the social paradigm. And right now, the social paradigm is this neurodiversity movement is really taking over the kind of social paradigm of these things. But the scientific paradigm, the sort of mainstream psychology, still kind of treats these things as disorders and still kind of, so couches things in terms of not only disorder, but also treatment and all that stuff. So some of that might still kind of pop up in our language. So if that's offensive, we apologize. We're open to learning, and we're open to learning more about this kind of stuff. And I'm just dipping my toe into it. And the reason I'm dipping my toe into it is because I was recently, as I discussed in the podcast, diagnosed with an actually pretty severe case of ADHD. So I've got a very, and I know it's not the most dramatic, diagnosis in the world, but it's pretty life-changing for me to kind of finally have some answers as to kind of why my brain does seem to work differently than others, for all of its benefits and downsides.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just kind of like, I'm very high functioning ADHD, so I'm kind of trying to embrace this idea that like, my brain's not broken, it just works differently. I am seeking medical compensation for that, because I want to see what medicine can do to help me compensate and help me kind of achieve the things I want to achieve that my ADHD is kind of getting in the way of. But I'm also very interested in not completely castrating myself, like castrating my brain and what it's capable of, because it's different. So I want to, I'm totally open to learning more and, figuring it out. So any feedback is welcome at this point. So video games. Let's jump into the meat of our podcast then. So after going through all of that and all those possible ideas and disclaimers surrounding neurodiversity and neurotypes, let's jump into our first question, which is, how do you think different neurotypes affect gaming skill, preference, etc.? Or how do you think neurodiversity affects gaming skills? So you can pick anything on that list and talk about, do you think it does have an effect on it, or do you think it doesn't, and what effect do you think it has?
I am pulling a paragraph out of a much longer article from neurodiversecounseling.com. There's a blog post from 2020 in July called Gaming with Intention. And in here talks about some of this aspects of things. The research appears to confirm much of my personal experience with gaming. Strategic video games such as role-playing games may improve problem-solving skills and increase academic grades. Perspective taking and pro-social behavior is supported by cooperating with individuals and groups as players navigate alliances from the unique perspective of a character or team. And so I wanted to capture that sentence, like being able to take perspective of something in your game, pro-social behavior, being able to work with others, cooperating with individuals and groups to navigate alliances from unique perspective of a character on a team. And you think about the multiplayer landscape of gaming and some of these neurodiverse symptoms across the spectrum of all of the things that happen. Some people are going to gravitate towards what might be shunned as introversion. They might not like to interact with people. They might not like having to cooperate with others, and so they would gravitate towards single playerness and single player experiences and stuff that they can get like on their own and not have to depend on anyone else. But it could also be one of these, I mean, you look at the list of conditions: anxiety disorders, OCD, multiple personalities, schizophrenia, depression, bipolar. Any of those things would immediately affect your social interactions or your expectations you would lay on your team and how you would affect other people that you're playing with. And so because the social aspect of gaming is so prevalent, it would absolutely affect your gaming skill, quote unquote. And I say that because it would affect your perceived skill at things. Also, on the autism spectrum, you have things like sensitivity to noise. On the epilepsy spectrum, you have sensitivity to visual flashing. You have color blindness.
That's like rough for epileptic gamers. But there are enough epileptic gamers out there that like games have to be designed now to prevent, like, to compensate for that. And if they don't compensate for that, then they have to actually, like, they're required by most of the distributors to include an epileptic warning out there. So it's clearly there's clearly epileptic gamers out there.
Mm-hmm. And then last comment, like I've had LAN parties with folks and I've played stuff online, and someone might not know they're colorblind, but they're playing a game terribly because they can't see something that's like an indicator on their screen, like entirely on the UI. It's gone from their perspective because they're colorblind. They can't see it. And other members don't know they're colorblind. They may not even know it, and accuse them of being like less of a gamer or like less skilled. I haven't experienced that personally. I just say like LAN parties where maybe that's happening. I'm not sure. It's just a social aspect of gaming where you're playing like split screen, or, you know, maybe something's going on in your brain that you're not aware of. Especially, you mentioned like attention deficit. Like maybe you're distracted and you're thinking about something else while you're playing this multiplayer game, and your team expects you to be on and like here and present, but you find it a struggle to do that. I don't know if that's something you struggle with or not, but it's definitely a viable path. And so there's a lot of things about these different neurological situations that you can be in that are non-neuronormal, whatever the neurotypical is. And all of those things at least affect your appearance of how it affects your skill or even your preferences of gaming.
Sure. I mean, I think that there's a lot of, you know, you definitely leaned in more to the social aspect of it, which is totally fine and valid, because again, a lot of these neurotypes would struggle with social interaction. I think specific autism is the obvious one there, but like again, each of these neurotypes are a trade-off. They all have advantages and they all have disadvantages. And one of the like well documented advantages of autism is like they're incredible at like pattern recognition and mathematics and stuff like that. So like I imagine a lot of autistic individuals or people on the autism spectrum are drawn towards things like puzzle games and even RPGs or strategy games because they're probably very good at them. They may have a harder time with social interaction, though, so those multiplayer games like that may be a little bit more of a struggle for them. Depression's an interesting one because, again, we see depression is a big one in our society that we see as something that needs to be treated and fixed. But there's this really interesting phenomenon documented called depressive realism that makes people with depression have, people with depression, the reason, again, they think scientists are thinking one of the reasons depression exists is because people with depression have an easier time understanding the reality of the world.
Yeah.
Whereas people who are like on cloud nine, not even, again, quote, neurotypical, who don't have this, are just like, yeah, blah, 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 there's nothing wrong, everything's great. And then don't see genuine threats coming ahead of time. So yes, the downside of depression is it's easy to get kind of stuck in this sort of like mental state of hard, challenge generating motivation and moving forward and moving past, harms and trauma done to them. But on the other side, they have this advantage, and I can see that being a huge advantage in certain games. I could also see them being drawn towards games that help them process their emotions and help them deal with their feelings. I think of games like Sea of Solitude or even Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, which are games about coming to terms with depression or coming to terms with loss. Those are even Majora's Mask in that regard. Like I can see those as being incredibly cathartic experiences to help them deal with their feelings and help them deal with that stuff, help them kind of process some of those downsides, while also being games that, again, treat the material seriously, which is something that would be advantageous for someone with a depressive neurotype. ADHD, again, obviously near and dear and close to my heart. They think that ADHD may have evolved into our, genetic DNA, because as tribal creatures, we would need members of our tribe that were good at switching between their focus between tasks a little bit more advantageously. So being like, fishing for a little bit and then setting up the shelter. And then, if one member of the tribe just sort of like hyper focused on something, they might not get the other things done that needed to get done. So there would be ADHD, quote unquote, ADHD members of the tribe going around, helping accomplish all the tasks, that would, all the tasks that need to get done, and being able to kind of switch between those things, which are, so being able to kind of switch between hyper focus on tasks and then being easily distracted by other tasks. Like there are games that reward that and are valuable for that as well. So yeah, I can definitely see it as being something where, different neurotypes are going to be drawn to games that reinforce their strengths or help them compensate for their weaknesses. And that includes the neurotypical neurotype as well. So that's kind of a thought, but
yeah.
Cool. Let's take the kind of similar approach to this same question, but talk about specific behaviors. So what neurotypes do you think are drawn to specific behaviors or even roles in games? Like when we talk about roles, we talk about like, who's leading a, if it's a multiplayer game, who's leading a group, if or you have your classic tank, DPS, healer paradigm, holy trinity. But it could even be roles in single player games where it's like, I want to if you're talking about an RPG, I want to role play as a character that's this. What do you think? Do you think certain neurotypes do you think that affects it? Do you think it has any effect on it?
So going back to like you talked about how I did the social aspect of things and not necessarily the scientific aspect of things. There is like a whole neurotyping categorization based on science, and that's like the hormones that regulate everything that happens in your brain. Stuff like dopamine and I can't even pronounce this stuff, but acetylcholine, if that's even how you say it. And you talk about how different roles within games. I'll give you one example. There's like type 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and 3. And they all have, the reason why they're categorized is because of what some people would call chemical imbalances, but others are now looking at this as, no, you just process chemicals differently. Yeah, it's just the way you're wired is different scientifically, and they can track this and measure it. So like you talk about, I'm going to just go down neurotype 1A. We'll just dissect this for a moment. Characteristics according to the tailored coaching method, which is very specific to physical fitness, but it applies here as well because they take personality traits to this that are a result of the scientific changes in chemical processing of your brain. So this characteristic of 1A likes a good challenge and competition, can handle stress very well, excels under pressure, can only focus on one thing at a time, often forgetful, extroverted and comfortable in public, very chilled at rest, but can lose temper quickly, likes to argue and to go against the grain, doesn't care what others think of him or her, very low anxiety, always looking for a new thrill. So to me, that sounds like a tank. Someone who can just jump in, good challenge, handles the stress of a situation very well, focusing on one thing at a time, and that is aggroing all the enemies and like doing a thing really well. Extroverted, so that you're talking amongst your team, you can fit in very well. But your downfalls are that you're forgetful about some things, and sometimes you lose your temper and argue with folks. But you're not anxious ever. You're kind of laid back, and you're always looking for a new thrill. So like the next boss fight, some different pattern could affect you. It's like, yes, that tank might not necessarily be the only role for that person, but that is a set of characteristics that might determine how you would play or approach specific games, especially games that like The Last of Us Part 2, for example. You can be very stealthy or you can be very upfront action, and you can choose which way you want to approach combat situations in that game however you would like. And I think some of these different neurotypes, you could probably draw some correlation into what neurotype you are and how you approach a game. And I would be like fascinated to see psychological studies done on groups of individuals that like play similar experiences, because a lot of games allow for a lot of dynamic approaches like The Last of Us Part 2, and you could probably draw some trends. I would like to see that.
Cool. Yeah. I think that it makes sense to me that like different neurotypes would probably be drawn to different roles. I can also see a lot of neurotypes being drawn to roles that allow them to escape from kind of their own reality. So I can see a lot of, if you were to like take a lot of these neurotypes and see them go into role-playing games and see what kind of characters they role-play as, I think that like, yeah, you'd see a lot of people who are drawn to the opposite of what they are. So someone who may, have anxiety might be drawn to a character that's, might be drawn to role play as someone who's very brave. Someone who's maybe struggles with social situations may be drawn to someone who is super sociable and outgoing. I could see it going both ways, quite frankly. Maybe you're drawn to characters that remind you of yourself, but yeah, I definitely think that. This, neurotype would affect people's tolerance for all kinds of things. Like different neurotypes may have an easier time, and have more enjoyment out of just grinding, whereas other neurotypes would be like, no, I absolutely don't want to grind. Any game that's too grindy, I won't touch it. I just want to play the game, have fun with it, and then put it away. I think all of those are probably greatly affected by neurotype, and I don't necessarily, want to take the time to go into examples, but I do think that like all these behaviors are probably like, I could go down the list and be like, okay, which of these neurotypes like to grind? Which of these neurotypes don't like to grind? You know what I mean? Like which of these neurotypes want to be leaders, I want to take charge of the group, and which ones want to, stay in the back. I think that a lot of that is, I wouldn't say dictated entirely by neurotype, but I do think that neurotype would be a huge influence on those types of behaviors in games for sure. So cool. All right, let's zoom back out of the games themselves and talk about like habits and purchases. How do you think neurotype affects, or do you think neurotype affects gaming habits and purchases?
So I know I exist on the OCD spectrum somewhere
Nice.
because if you go to psnprofiles.com and you look at Termite 04, you will see 52 platinums. And I have an obsession almost about I hate low trophy percentages on my wall. It is a thing I've talked about a lot on this podcast, but it's the meta games to how I approach gaming in general. And you talk about gaming habits and purchases. I have wasted money, quote unquote, because I would buy a game on PlayStation when I can play it on Game Pass. I would buy it on PlayStation because trophies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want the trophies there. That's the ecosystem I want to be on. In the past, I would always have like this weird loyalty to a franchise and its branding and determine what console I would buy it on. And a good example is like Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, which is essentially Mortal Kombat 5, came out on PS2, GameCube, and Xbox. But for me, I grew up playing Mortal Kombat on Nintendo, so I needed to have it on GameCube. It didn't make sense to have it on PlayStation or Xbox. Weird kind of like things that affect
ritualistic. It's almost ritualistic. Like
yeah, it kind of is. And so I'm speaking from personal experience about one specific type of neurotype. Sorry, yeah. Mm-hmm. One specific neurotype. And I know there's got to be a whole lot out there that are different than me, but that's just like one example of the dumb stuff, quote unquote dumb, that people would perceive as like, wow. I know I listened to Colin Moriarty's Sacred Symbols podcast. He was at IGN for years. He went on to he founded Kind of Funny Games and then left, and he has this current podcast. He talked about how he will not play Final Fantasy VII Remakes expansion, the DLC, what's it called? Intergrade,
yeah.
Because it doesn't have a PS4 version, and so it diverges from the trophy list, and it's supposedly going to have two separate trophy lists, but the PS5 version will have this DLC, and the PS4 version will not. And he said he doesn't like it, and he's not going to buy it until it comes to PS4, so that the trophy list like matches. And that's a more extreme version even of what I'm doing when it comes to trophies. But that's just a perfect example of like how to approach gaming. What you have all these different platforms. Where are you going to play? Who are you going to play with? And what you're doing as a gamer, how you exist in that industry is completely dictated by your neurotypes.
Yeah, I mean, I can say for myself, like I as an ADHD person, you know, I can look back at my life and see how my ADHD has affected that. Like when I first got into Steam and like all these games on sale, it's like, I mean, and I know that everybody kind of has this experience. So it, you know, again, you don't have to be ADHD to have this experience, but it was certainly not helped by my ADHD and being just like, oh, look at this game, it's on sale, I want to play that, I want to play a bit of 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 that. And you end up spending more money on games you don't complete because of all the jumping around, because it's so tantalizing. And Steam is almost set up to capitalize, I think, on ADHD tendencies. Not necessarily the entire neurotype, but certainly on tendencies. And I can say that like over time I've grown to like, I think in many ways that's why I was drawn to games like World of Warcraft and even just the looter genre in general, is because they provided like ADHD people apparently thrive under structure, I've learned. And like World of Warcraft just gives you that structure on a platter. Like, here's all these things to do, and here's the best order in which you should do, like the optimal order in which you should do them. It's just like, it takes all the like distraction out of it. Like, great, I can go do this and knock it off my checklist. You know what I mean? Like, I have my checklist. I think that can be very attractive to that kind of game can be very attractive to people with my neurotype. And so now I feed that beast, that same kind of beast, and impose the structure upon myself. For the most part, I don't do this I don't stay entirely married to this, but instead of jumping around from game to game to game and spending tons of money on buying every PlayStation game that crosses my fancy, I for the most part just sort of commit to a single game, and I use trophies as my structure. I commit to the game. Once I platinumed it, I can move on. I allow myself to move on to the next game. If I don't feel like platinuming the trophy, then I say, okay, well, when I run credits or for whatever reason have a satisfactory experience. So a good, the most recent example I come back to is Resident Evil 3. There's no way in heck I'm going to go get the platinum on it. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous trophy. So I just say, great, well, once I've sort of had the experience of beating the game, then I'll move on to the next one. So one or the other. If I'm not going after the trophy, I find some other benchmark upon which to say I will move on to the next game. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's definitely, it has, I can definitely tell how my neurotype has sort of affected that mentality. My various mentality and treatment of gaming over the years has totally been affected by my neurotype. That said, a lot of these neurotypes are also just like, some of these neurotypes, I should say, are more drawn towards gaming in general just because it scratches whatever itch their neurotype deals with. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to probably find a higher number of ADHD gamers than, ADHD volleyball players. You know what I mean? Like a higher ratio.
Yeah.
And that's because, again, games impose structure, which is valuable for ADHD people. I would be interested in seeing like the number of autistic gamers or the number of depressed gamers over other like hobbies, like the ratio over other hobbies, just because I think there are some neurotypes that would be averse to gaming, like epilepsy. And then yet again, there's also tons of epileptic players, obviously, or else we wouldn't be getting those epilepsy warnings. So I don't know, like maybe there are some, I would be interested to see if there are neurotypes that are more averse to gaming in general just because of what it is, versus more that are drawn to it because of what it is, just because of their neurotype. I think there probably is some data to support all that. It just hasn't been gathered.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right, last question here. What do you think developers, or do you think the industry in general should be paying more attention to neurotype when designing games, or do you think they should design games and whatever neurotypes are drawn to them are drawn to them?
So there's two ways to approach this in my brain, just answering this right off the cuff. There's two ways. One, representation in the video games themselves, and that is the main characters or the most supporting characters of the title or the plot are structured around dealing with a neurotype, or not even necessarily dealing with a neurotype, but having a character that has one represented. Exactly. And we're seeing a major push in the gaming industry to be more inclusive and more representative of everything that's out there. That's LGBT, that's different races, and we're seeing neurotypes as well. There's an article on Wired.com specifically about an Overwatch character that is on the autism spectrum and being that representation for them. That's great. And then we talked about Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice being a representation of dealing with depression, or is it schizophrenia? I'm sorry, I was going to say psychopath, but yeah, schizophrenia. And so like games like those have the content that represents the various neurotypes. And then when designing games, then you have the idea of allowing and being more inclusive to people of different neurotypes to play your game. And that is The Last of Us Part 2 is the cream of the crop of the what they call accessibility features. And that is tweaking the game to reduce things that would cause epileptic people to not be comfortable, reducing the things that autism players might not find comfortable. That is like loud, jolting noises and very there's a word I'm looking for, like a visceral type of interactions that you might want to tone down. And games can do that, or colorblind modes that will allow different types of that to be more inclusive, to allow people. And that's not just physical accessibility, but also neurotypical, not disabilities, but accessibilities. The opposite of being disabled, accessible to everyone. That's what we want.
Exactly. Yeah.
We want to include more, and we want to make and play games that are allowing everyone to play together, regardless of what your mental state or physical state is, or who you are, or where you're from. And so there's a push on both sides that are awesome, on both double-pronged approach to be representative and to be accessible to everyone. And it's great.
To piggyback off that idea, I'll play against my type here. And we'll be a little bit role reversal here, and I'll talk from the greedy capitalist perspective here. And I would just say that like I think the game developers would be stupid to not consider it because of what I just said in the previous question, which is I think there are a lot of neurotypes out there that may be averse to gaming in general because of what it is. And so I think developers and producers would be wise to consider, okay, what kinds of games could we design that would then be attractive to them instead? I think that we could it would have another multi-pronged approach there where it'd be like, on the one hand, we as the gaming community would probably get really more interesting games. I mean, in fact, maybe even entire genres that we hadn't considered before out of that kind of exercise. And then of course the gaming community would grow, and the gaming community would grow more diverse by becoming more attractive to neurotypes that may be naturally averse to the kinds of games that are already out there. So I think that would be what I would say.
And quote, greedy capitalists would love it because there's more people buying your games.
Money, exactly. Yep. That's why I brought it up. Money. Yep. So yeah, exactly. Cool. All right. I think that's probably a good place to stop. 1 hour and 5 minutes in. That's a pretty solid ending time. I think we did a pretty decent job with the conversation, so I'm pleased with it. So we want to hear your thoughts. What did we get wrong? What did we mess up on this movement? Or do you not buy into this entire thing at all? We want to be open to those thoughts as well. So please give us your thoughts if you're just like, no, these are sick people and you're enabling that. We would like to engage with you on that and see if we can come to an understanding with one another. So please, whether you have criticisms, comments, corrections, feedback. We want to hear all of that and more. And Termite, where can the good pod smashers of the internet reach out to us if they have feedback to give?
The first place to go is 80bitpodsmash.com, our landing website with links to all of our podcast platforms and social media outlets. You can also find us on twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash every Monday and Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we have our news show and our live gameplay stream. We have a Discord server. The link to that is in all of our show notes, as well as 80bitpodsmash.com. We have our YouTube channel is also there. There are various places you can leave a comment. You can reach out to us directly through Messenger or email, and you can contact us during our live streams and interact with our audience there. So just anywhere you are on the internet, we want to be as well. And so there we are. Hit us up.
Word. All right. Next week we have an episode on something. We are going to continue our Wikipedia's best games list. So part 7, part
Woohoo!
6. I don't know how many episodes.
It goes on and on and on.
It continues to go because Penguin bit off more than he can chew when he came up with that idea. So we're going to do that again, and that will be on May 17th. So we'll see you then.
See you next week.